For anyone who doesn't know, who's here for the exchange for the first time? Most of you are like my friends, so that's cool. Awesome, you guys are my friends. Welcome. So this place started 5 years ago because there was a lack of messy and affordable, kind of rough feeling spaces for artists to work together. So the idea was just make it affordable, and then any of the profits just go back into supporting those artists and those projects. And obviously, I'll touch on a bit of the exchange in my presentation, just because a place that is, kind of creating like this really fun environment and working with a lot of creatives and projects, there's obviously a lot of failure involved. But as a project itself, it's also constantly finding its grounding in a city that's rebuilding itself. I'm sure every other project and business or personal passion is also trying to find that grounding. So Exchange can relate to that big time. So when Erica, so I guess the rest of Exchange, the way that it works is it's meant to give creative people a place to produce work, so they have studios, and a place for them to showcase it, so people can come in and experience what it is people are making. These are all artworks by young artists that were age 6 to 13, that have taken lessons by one of our painters in the studios. So this is a place to casually, for people to share their creative expression. It might be performance, it might be poetry, it might be dance. So this room is all about that kind of energy, and then the cafe and the bar make it really easy for people to be able to come in and experience what it is people are making in the city. So that's kind of the magic of the space. I was really excited when any email I get from Erica is going to be like, "What are you doing next?" And she was like, "Oh, we'd love for you to speak at Fail Club." And I was like, "Excuse me? Is it like, what are you saying?" And then I was just like, "Yeah, okay." I am really grateful for Erica to be giving me the opportunity to share a bit of my journey, because often trying to work behind the scenes mostly, but you learn a lot of things along the way that it's nice to share. So I thought I would just kick things off by making the first fail of the night. I don't know if anybody can read this, but I decided to name this "Why So Seriously?" That was actually an accident, and I went to fix the typo, and I was like, let's just get the failure out of the way really fast, and we'll go from there. So to tell you a bit about myself, I'm 27 years old, and I'm a multi-potentialite. Roll your eyes now. That is just a confused millennial, basically. For anyone who didn't see, there's a really cool TED Talk about multi-potentialites, and it's just about how some people are really good at finding what their purpose is, sticking to it, building that skill their whole life, and being recognized and honored for it. Other people, like myself, just find the world a really fascinating and amazing place, and what everyone is capable of doing, I just want to hear more about, and I want to try it myself. So I consider myself almost in a constant state of curiosity. After the presentation, if you want to have more chats with me, here's some random facts about me. I find it easy to know a few things about someone, and it helps you start a conversation with them. So hurry, you only have like 2 seconds. 3, 2, 1. But the two I'm going to talk about is actually how these two are linked. So being homeschooled, and this ability to feel like you can learn anything, and if you can learn to do anything, then you can do anything, right? Just about. But the environment, I guess, that I grew up in, and why it kind of, I haven't really thought about it much. Like, this presentation really made me think a lot about the difference of being homeschooled and in the school system. My parents were really smart. I grew up mostly with a babysitter because both of my parents worked. And what we would do is we would be given work, me and my sister. We'd be sent off to the babysitters, come back and sit down as a family and talk about what was harder for us to learn. Was it harder to learn the math today than it was how to read or write? Not, you didn't do that, or you failed at that. It was just, so this is going to take a bit more time. So my view of learning or failure right from the start was that it wasn't the way that we see failure now, which is like a roadblock or a single barrier. Failure was just a part of something that you experience as a way of getting, acknowledging that you don't know how to do something yet, basically. So that was something that helped me kind of come up with these 3 topics. So kind of throughout the times where it feels a little more like something is like stopping you versus just it's a part of life, as perspective, practice, and purpose. So I'll go into a bit more of those. And I often just think, and the way the presentation will go, I'll kind of talk about some of the rules that I've learned around failure, and then at the end I'll share a particular failure in my life, that these 3 things were what helped me feel a little bit more regrounded. It's kind of weird that I have to look back at these guys because I don't want them to hear this. Cover your ears. No, okay. So the first thing with perspective is just to measure the failure. I'm terrified of public speaking. I chugged a beer before I got up here. Go me. Not hiding that. So no, really measure your fear. So the fact of what I learned growing up, that you're kind of you're failing all the time because you don't know everything. So if you're really good at piano but you don't know guitar, you're not failing at guitar. But if I was to pick one up and go for it, I would be failing at guitar, right? So the idea of measure is just I kind of take time, I won't say every day, but whenever I feel challenged, I'm just what does it mean to fail right now? Am I failing you guys as a host tonight? Did I do good on the health and safety? In the background, am I a failure as a son, right? There's so many elements of our lives that are moving all the time. So for me, I guess my perception of failure is less around the barrier and just acknowledging that there's a lot of things that I could be better at, and it depends on where you want to put your energy. So coming back to the roadblock thing, failure, if you end up learning something and going past it, this is always so much easier said than done. Edison's whole light bulb thing, you failed 1,000 times. No, you found 1,000 ways that didn't work. That is not the feeling I have whenever I fail. I'm just I'm over this. But ultimately, every time I look back at it, it was an opportunity to learn. That's pretty much what I already said. So as far as the measuring thing, I use this guy as an example because he basically went out to be rejected. So he'd go out and ask strangers for $100. He'd ask people for rides to really random places like Area 51 or something. But what he said was, after doing this kind of project on his TED Talk, was that he actually did realize that he didn't fail when he was rejected. He actually ended up opening up way more possibilities and opportunities by just asking in the first place. And I think that that's where we start to realize that often the bigger failure that goes unnoticed isn't the thing that happens down the road. It's the fact that we never took that first step because we were so afraid of what would happen when we got there and faced that fear or faced that potential failure that's down the road. So a lot of people are my friends back home, how did you move to New Zealand? Or even start traveling? How did you let go of things, all of these risks? And I was I started to feel like I was failing by not even trying. And that's something that I would say if anyone does or anyone comes to me and feels like they're hitting a roadblock, I'm just well, it's great that you reached this roadblock in the first place because you've at least done something to get here. And that's probably more than a lot of other people. I think Christchurch has more people working on stuff than any other city I've ever been in. So lots of roadblocks as well. But taking the first few steps and just getting started is actually a failure to me. That was also a typo that I forgot to take out. Go me. Okay. The next one is practice. So this is where the exchange kind of really kind of taught me something new about the environment. So a lot of people saw when I set out traveling, they were it's such a world of unknowns. And I was maybe, but if you find the thing that might ground you in a place that you're aiming towards, or at least if you know what it is. For me, it was parks in cities. So back in Asheville, there was Pritchard Park. Everybody played hacky sack. They came off the Appalachian Trail. People brought food out and they ate together. And I was okay, this works no matter where you are. So if I go to a new city, I just want to go to a park, I'll hang my hammock, and I'll just talk to whoever comes by. It broke down a lot of the fear of ever leaving home or leaving and traveling to a new scary place. So the idea of practice, first, when you practice something new, reduce the risks, cost, time, and status, or social status. They're pretty self-explanatory. If you're going to try to do something, maybe don't try it in New York City, or Silicon Valley. Failure is pretty full on there. So time, if you're committing to do something and you're afraid to fail, you're afraid to reach that point, well, just know how much you're willing to invest in time if it doesn't work. And I put the little TF there because I knew I'd forget this part. Timothy Ferriss wrote something in one of his books, and he was imagine if life is on a scale of 0 to 10, and 0 is you're homeless under a bridge, 10 is you're a multi-trillionaire, living forever. Cool. And you put yourself wherever you want on that spectrum. He says, when you fail, or when you take a risk and you're kind of deciding if it's the right thing to do or not, and you're afraid, or if you fail, he says the odds are you'll lose a point on that scale, and it's temporary. You'll lose a point, and it's temporary. If it works, you gain a point or two, and it's permanent, because you've kind of created momentum. The idea of you getting homeless to the point of being homeless under a bridge, I asked myself this when I started traveling. I was like, well, I could always come home. No, I could never go home. But I'm probably not going to be homeless under a bridge. So that kind of put things into perspective of what is really the risk, and then where could I go where the odds of ending up homeless under a bridge were less likely. So this is where the exchange to me is such a perfect example, and it's kind of like this trifecta between a space that's meant to do something, the people who show up to do it, and then like that energy that they create. So the idea, and what I found here, of people being very open with their creative practice. And artists to me are like the ultimate, I don't want to say failures, but if you think about it, like they start writing a song or painting a picture, and they do not know how it's going to end up, right? Those first few notes are not the last. Like there's a whole thing that comes, there's a whole process, they call it the creative process. And so ultimately, almost every time they start something, it probably is a failure from the start, and then the iteration time and time again is what makes it something beautiful. And those artists are generally seen and known and heard. But it takes, to me, the environment where failure is embraced, I guess you could say. So that might be classrooms, workshops, incubators, labs, accelerators. Those are the places where you go and people are just like, it doesn't matter if it doesn't work. I'm here to do it. So it attracts the right people. It creates the right kind of culture. If you stop talking about trying things and winning just by trying is the win, not actually the final product. So Google's a great example of that. I'm sure everybody knows a lot about failure. I'll get to my story, I promise. When people fail, they celebrate it and then they send them on leave, because they know that hitting that barrier of something not working is hard. So give people the time to clear their head a little bit and come back to it with what they've learned. So the fact that they know how to do that kind of says that there's something right. There's actually a formula for this. And to be able to step away and kind of bring yourself back together and step into something again is the right formula. And then purpose. Has it changed your goal? It's a pretty extreme example, which is why I used it. Arnold Schwarzenegger says, you will fall, and when you fall, the winner always gets up and the loser stays down. My thing is when I set out to travel, it wasn't, I want to get from here to here and stay here. It was, I want to just continue to explore. I looked at a lot of my friends and families and stuff that I grew up with, and I was like, nobody here is working on something outside of this. I wonder what's out, what's that direction. And yeah, it didn't always work, but I knew that at least moving forward was taking me somewhere. You guys get it. You know what it's like. But has it changed your goal? No, it just didn't work the first time. And then it also gives you a lot of opportunities to reflect and ask yourself the questions of, okay, cool, like, is the reason why it didn't work because I wasn't actually personally ready for it and things like that? This is all the stuff that you guys know about failure. But I used a coconut because I was like, could you imagine whoever just found coconuts all over the ground and cleaning them up, and they were like, oh my gosh, this is so hard, but then inside something's so beautiful. That's failure. That's failure. Nice. Okay, so my turn. So something happened. I moved here in December 2015, fell in love with this place, fell in love with everything Christchurch was struggling with and fighting for and figuring out, and on the whole volatile nature of let's just do this thing. And I really wanted to stay. So I couldn't really bring myself to talk about my number one failure because that's really hard. I wouldn't say it's number one, but the first one that came to mind. So I'll talk about my second one. In July 6, 2017, I saw the opportunity to apply for a visa that would not only keep me in the country, but give me a lot of tools to work with other people that I felt like came here for the same reason as me. And I was like, oh, this is great. I'm running this awesome organization. It's super aligned with this thing. And other people like me are coming from all around the world to do it. And I'm just so excited. This is everything that I was hoping for. And I got told no. And I'm thinking about this time the cost and the status, right? Those three things that I mentioned about reducing risk. Time was of the essence. I only had a very short visa, so the risk was high. Cost, applications, visas, the documents, that stuff, that costs a lot of money. Status, my social status didn't change here, which is the thing that I didn't notice. But the social status for me of not feeling good enough or being wanted, even in a country, was really hard. This is why I didn't take the first one. I will cry. So processing those three Ps of what my perspective was, how it changed of myself. I felt like a failure. I felt like I went out to find what it was that I set out to do in the world. I picked the place to do it, and now I also wasn't welcomed. Like, did I not earn this? What, you question everything about yourself. There's those three things. And I'm going to tell you about the first one. 6 months later, I apply for the same visa, and I got turned down again. And after thinking about, well, I'm going to learn from this failure when I got told no the first time. I'm going to get some feedback and go for it again. There's really good work here, and there's a way out, right? And I got turned down again. I know that with failure, we were thinking probably it's easy to liken it to businesses of like, I put all my heart and energy into this, it cost this amount, it dropped. But it's like, but you're on stage talking about it, so it's obviously not that big of a deal. I'm still in this country, it's not that big of a deal. But just the power of something that affects the feeling of failure. Like, we can talk, like all this stuff, talk about, failure's not a big deal, it happens every day. It can just be being told no once to bring everything down and to really challenge like reality. So I went back to those three things, and I'm still here. Everything's fine. But thanks. But the three things, and I wrote these down without being able to memorize them. But the first thing was measure. It wasn't my only option. So the risk of the time costs and status and stuff. Well, it wasn't the only direction that I took. So being told no actually hurt a lot less when I realized, but that's okay, because maybe that wasn't the right fit, but I know that where I am here with these people is. And whatever other option it was that I took at the time to keep me here, it worked. And so I'm still actually where I want to be. That never changed. So like the failure again was actually this thing that I created in my mind that I needed this other thing. Being here was the point. It worked. And it took bravery, measuring it took bravery, and I'm glad I tried. Taking those steps, fine. Still here? Cool. Practice. I was able to gather feedback on what didn't work, and it helped me set new goals and gave me a new direction I could grow in. And then the purpose, I didn't just want a visa, I wanted to meet other people like me, and I was seeking recognition that what I was doing was right, and I realized I didn't them to tell me. I don't know what that means. That's the part that I was talking about, that I was seeking recognition and validation over here when I actually had it right here the whole time, where I actually belonged and where I actually still am. So what felt like this monstrosity of a challenge and a failure actually just put me probably right where I needed to be. So I actually can't remember. No, that's it. Yeah, so that's my story of failure. That's my perspective, that's my practice, and that's my purpose.